Hey, you guys. Welcome. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ray and I are here today to, well, actually, we've been talking for like an hour, haven't we? We've been connecting, and because I think we're both about connection. And you know, our life's work is connection. And you know, I think connecting ourselves with others, but helping others to connect with each other, and that's what you do.
I love to bring people together. Yeah.
Yeah, and love is of course the operative word in there. You know, the magic word in the middle of all of that.
Well, those are the ideal conditions, right?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Well, yes. So we've been talking about creating, and yet creating from a place of allowing, you know, creating from a place of faith or trust or belief in that, you know, the world is unfolding as it should, and we're on purpose. I mean, you must be on purpose because the results are there, right? You know, you've had Sangha for how many years?
This will be our sixth.
6 years of creating this amazing weekend festival. I'm sorry that last year was my first time. But
You
not
brought
really.
the rain, right?
No, I did not bring the rain. It was not me. But it was beautiful to be there and to, you know, because I love that space. Yeah, I've done other events there, and I love that space that you do that in. So we were talking for a while, you guys, about how, you know, how do you allow this sort of thing to happen without controlling, and yet having a vision so that people can follow and move into that vision. And I think you're pretty darn good at that.
Oh, it's been trial and error for sure. I mean, there's a whole new level of professionalism and planning that needs to evolve every year as the festival continues to grow. It's not 100 people in a field picking plants anymore. It's a lot of people to manage and navigate, and to ensure that everybody gets value out of that experience. Yeah, it's definitely a constant evolution of learning for myself and for the people that, you know, that co-create with me for this particular event.
So for those of you that don't know, Ray is involved, and this was your idea in the beginning, right? And now it's a collaborative idea of so in the beginning it started as a festival, or not?
I think it still is a festival. I think it's, you know, whenever we get diverse members of the community coming together, I think it's reason to celebrate. And the structure of the actual gathering is the creation of workshops and classes, discussion groups, and creating a space for people to learn a little bit better about themselves and how they experience the world, and what they might need to navigate on their own personal journeys. So when we go through stuff like that as a community, I think it's really important that festivities are a big part of the weekend gathering. We need to laugh together, we need to laugh at ourselves.
Dance. Yeah, dance is so important. Dance is awakening.
I think dance is the highest evolution of human movement.
Nice. Yes. Let's dance more. Yeah, nice. So what weekend is it this year?
This weekend it's June 26th, 27th, 28th, and 29th. So the 29th would be Monday morning when we tear down. And yeah. So Canada Day long weekends on a Wednesday.
Okay.
So there was no choosing a long weekend per se with either a Friday or Monday off. But most people do tend to take a Monday off. So we went through that and took that option. And the following weekend is also Calgary Stampede. So we know that we won't be competing with that as well. And, you know, there are some people that, you know, it's flipping a coin between Stampede and Sangha. But also when it comes to renting equipment, if we need to rent tents or anything like that, it's really hard to do when the Calgary
Stampede's on.
I was going to say Folk Fest, Calgary Stampede's on. So,
Yeah. Oh, good for you. And I mean, people in our city are involved in Stampede not just because they want to go to the event. They're sometimes they're working.
Yeah.
They're the whole town kind of gets involved in that, and
it's another event that brings people together, and I enjoy it. I love the music, the bands that come in.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of great bands at Stampede.
Really? Nice. So, tell us how you doing these days. What's going on in your life?
I've kind of been a bit reclusive over the last little while, and this was something that I chose to do. I wanted to do some deep reflections on myself. I wanted to learn more about myself. I've reawakened this incredible passion for reading. So most nights when my responsibilities are taken care of, I just read. And when I'm reading some very difficult things that I really have to read with a dictionary, and when I think about what does it mean to me and how would I share that, I find myself picking up pen and paper and writing stories. And this is what gave birth to the theater production we put on last November, Theatrum, which was a theatrical experience on the history of storytelling and theater. And I find myself just loving all of that. So
you did you wrote a play?
Yeah, it's actually right now being considered for the Calgary Fringe Festival. So fingers crossed that we get accepted.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a combination of storytelling on theater and the history of storytelling, right through mythologies into women on stage. And after 4, 5, 6 minutes of me doing a story and the pretext, a particular performance group would come out and enact that. So we had our story told not only through me verbally addressing the audience, but we had an opera singer, jazz singer, acrobats, Mediterranean dancers, comedians. It was a lot of fun.
Nice.
And another big learning experience for me too.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So yeah, that's I'm doing a lot of that right now. I'm working on another story which I may or may not bring to the public at the end of April, which would be an exploration on desires. So that's looking at religious, mythological, psychological influences to our desires, looking at both the conscious and unconscious desires, followed up by some tantric workshops that explore desires. But that would also be dependent on, how I feel about 2 months being away from Sangha and reserving my energy and whether or not we get into the Fringe Festival. So at the very least, I love writing these stories, and they might just go into a file for later.
Nice.
But they definitely help me understand the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Tantra. It's interesting in our community, and maybe this is happening all over, but Tantra seems to be up. People are exploring. A lot of teachers in our city are playing around, mostly with the intro version of and some of the Western version of Tantra, and having been to India and been a fan for many years of Osho, and in his conversation around Tantra, he said, how do you spell Tantra? Y-E-S. Right? Tantra is yes. And understanding that the depths of the tantrikas and the whole religion as such, have you studied in that?
Oh, it's my process now. Like, I don't know what the timeline was, maybe 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago maybe. I started going to the tantric workshops here, and I found it no different than people getting into yoga for the first time. They go to a yoga class, they want to look fit, they want to feel good. So it is a invitation into a whole new world through something that they're familiar with. So when I look at the tantric workshops here going on in Calgary, there's a lot of workshops that delve into some level of intimacy, and really intimacy is a part of our everyday human experience with probably just about everything, I think, if we're living a healthy life. But it's nonetheless, it's an introduction. It was an introduction for me. But I found myself after about 6 or 7 months, I kind of pulled away from a vast majority of the workshops because it opened up something deeper inside of me that I needed to explore not necessarily in workshops, but on my own.
So you did some reading, found some...
Lots of things, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Really passionate about comparative mythologies. Whatever I can get my hands, I read about. And of course, whenever you read something that you're passionate about and you start looking at where some of the reference comes, it starts to open up a whole new world. As I was mentioning earlier today, like finding out some of my favorite writers in comparative mythologies were influenced by Carl Jung. So I'm reading Carl Jung, albeit slowly because it's hard to digest. But the thing is like being able to relate to different stories and different ways of looking at our story kind of gives a bigger picture for me. And this is where I've been for quite a while now. And I do feel like I'm coming out now. I kind of want to go out more. And
Did you find a story? Like I've been watching a series called Vikings. And I mean, the Viking mythology, you know, with their gods. And I mean, they have vast, huge stories, you know. So as cultures develop story, in many ways it's because our ego wants a story to hold on to. The idea of not having or identifying with any particular story or any particular culture, surrendering all of that stuff, is not for the faint of heart.
I can't remember whose research this was, but what this particular researcher was suggesting through research was that human beings can only get together in a certain amount of numbers where they can cohesively work together. Anything beyond that turns into chaos, unless there's something or some things that bind people together.
Story.
And story is one of them.
Yeah.
And mythologies are tremendously big. Now, yeah, the Viking mythologies are really quite wonderful. But when you look at the pretext to all of that, when we looked back in the Paleolithic, Neolithic, the Copper Age, so before the Bronze Age, and I guess kind of into the Bronze Age, we had two different ways that people kind of lived their lives. We had the people in the agricultural belt, and their interactions with the earth had them start to realize deep connections between nature and themselves. So what they saw out there, they recognized inside of themselves, and they gave that symbology the essence of the goddess. The warriors to the north and to the south, they were hunter-gatherers, and organization, law and order, reason and logic were fundamental to their survival. And through that, they gave birth to the god mythology. And it's the god mythology that went into the Vikings. Mm-hmm. Even the Celts, they were all the god mythologies. And in fact, to this day, Western civilization is built on this masculine god mythology, but it doesn't have to be that way. And this is what I find really quite interesting.
So I find, yes, of course, the Vikings had a more of a masculine, and I guess the Greeks was pretty masculine too. I mean, the Greek mythology.
Originally, Greece was goddess mythology.
Okay.
They were invaded by, which I think a lot of people commonly call the Aryans, the Indo-Europeans. They were the warriors. But the warriors of the north, they also recognized the value of nature. So when they conquered what is now Greece, they understood and gave value to the goddesses. They just weren't as important as the gods. And I guess probably the most important relevant god was Zeus.
In Greek mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And
in many mythologies around there, yeah.
Mm-hmm. In Christian mythology, you know, Mary would have been the feminine.
Yeah, to some degree, but I mean, that wasn't until 390 AD. So how many, over 300 years after Jesus was actually Mary given any kind of legitimate, relevant claim. But even then, it wasn't a projection of how the original goddess was.
Mm-hmm. So Mary Magdalene.
Okay, I thought you meant Mother Mary.
Mother Mary, yes. Well, Mary Magdalene also was like an apostle, wasn't she? Or, you know, there's writings that never made the Bible that were Mary's writings. And you okay? Okay, yeah.
All our fans are leaving. Told you we talk about God.
Yeah, and people fuck off. Yeah. Anyway, so mythology, though, and as in my time of life right now, as I seem to be surrendering a lot of the concepts of what I thought were the foundation of my life into this idea of being here now without holding on to these things. I've had to look at the things that I'm surrendering, and some of what I've been surrendering are the stories that I was told as a child, and that I believed were true. As a young child, I let go of Santa Claus, but it was a foundational story, and then there's also the Christian stories and whatever the mythology happens to be, and it's really obvious that when we look at Hindu mythology, with all the gods that they have and all the stories that they have, that it's much easier to see that's a mythology. It's a story. It's not a.
But even in Hindustan, before the gods, it was the goddess. It was the goddess that was recognized as relevant and important, and that role model. It was.
But either way, it was a story.
It was a story, yeah.
And so one doesn't take away from whether it was God or goddess, although if it was a God story, it helped to create more of a masculine society, or it leaned more to the masculine in a way, if the story was but I think there's a place beyond that, and I wonder if you're discovering that as you go deep into the story, why it is that we need story.
I believe story binds us as a community, as a civilization. I believe stories stimulate a call to think of things differently. I believe a story can contribute towards vision. So we were talking about visions. Stories have been, ever since I was a child, a strong contribution towards me getting ideas and visions and seeing things differently.
So not right or wrong, good or bad. Just I think it's important for those of us who are seekers. That's a bit of a story in itself, but recognize that that story has had a big part in keeping us from really connecting with Source.
I don't think so. I think it can contribute towards Source as long as we're allowed to talk and speak freely without judgment or ridicule. I mean, even back in those days of 10,000 years ago, the hearth was one of the most important places for learning. It was the place around the fire where people would gather and exchange their stories. It was the place where previous conceptions would be shattered. And again, this was all goddess mythology. And eventually, when the god mythologies came in, they replaced that particular goddess with Dionyson, who became a fundamental part of what it means to have theater and storytelling.
Dionyson? I don't know Dionyson. In what mythology? Greek or
where Dionyson
Celtic?
came from? No, not Celt. I can't remember where Dionyson came from, but when the invasion came into Greece, that mythology replaced Hesta, who was normally the one that had to do with the art of storytelling. So Hesta had everything, was the goddess of the hearth. Everyone sits around the fire and tells stories. And this was a place where ideas were shared and people grew and transcended. Dionyson came in, and he was, among many things, the god of wine. But the symbology of wine is this is where you intoxicate yourself. You loosen up your attachments and you open yourself up to something different.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
And
I don't know if
something different.
I don't
for
know.
sure.
Do many people actually change their ideas after wine, or do they just get more attached to them?
Maybe. Well, so the internet has become the new hearth.
I guess it is. It's not for me. Like, I know I can get those. What are those books you read off your tablet? Kindle books. But I still, even last night, I just love to go in the bookstore and wander up and down the bookshelves, to have that book in my hand, to detail where I can reference that. I don't know. There's something that maybe I'm old school, but I just love it.
I love bookstores. I found this amazing bookstore in Portland every time I go down the West Coast, I go to Portland to go to this bookstore, and it's like, it's huge. There's floors and floors of.
Oh,
God.
Hmm?
Greek God.
Who is?
Tennyson.
Ah.
yeah.
So,
Well, he is now. Like Apollo and all that, they weren't. Zeus was not. Yeah. That was just part of the amalgamation, is that I recognize what you call a goddess, but we call that a god, so we're just going to switch the name. So that was kind of what happened. Yeah.
in the storytelling. Well, when we do Sangha, so tell me about the name. Sanghas come out of the Hindu mythology.
It's a practicing Buddhist term.
It's a Buddhist term, okay. All right.
It may have originated from the Hindu faith,
Yes.
and that is, if memory serves correct, that may very well be the case. A lot of things, cultures just borrow from each other. I mean,
Yeah.
even some of the Buddhist goddesses, like the Green Tantra, is taken from Hinduism. But Sangha is a intentional community coming together to support each other.
Sounds like what I was talking about.
Yeah, exactly. But really stuck out for me, was it my heart? Was it's also a prophecy that the next great teacher for humanity won't come in the shape of a human being like Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad that we've had in the past, but will actually come in the form of this intentional community, showing the world that we can come together and support each other and support the way we see the world and help us transcend. So that is the foundation. Now, within that foundation, we strive hard every year to bring in diversity. So that has meant corporate Calgary and the Tantra community and the movement community and the Indigenous community was our breakthrough last year by getting a Indigenous council member to help us link up with elders and include that community.
Nice.
So we really see that's really important. And it's a lot of work to put on this festival. I won't lie to anybody. Sometimes it really exhausts me physically and emotionally, but every year I learn how I can be better at that.
Do you need more help?
I think at this particular point, I think we're okay. We have 20 council members covering about 23 or 24 positions. And if anything this year, I feel like so much more amazing people coming in to support this particular vision.
Nice.
Yeah. And then the theme this year is mythologies.
Who is it?
It's stories, yeah. Everybody's got stories, and some people I see at Sangha, I only see at Sangha once a year, and our stories shift and our experiences shift. So we are looking at creating a weekend with this as a theme. So
Is your mum coming?
my mom's coming, yeah.
Love your mum.
So this will involve workshops on storytelling. Some of the interesting things that we're looking at doing is possibly having lunchbox theater on Saturday for lunch, so people can come down with their blankets and watch lunchbox theater.
Nice.
We've been looking at doing the Olympic Games on Saturday afternoon. So a lot of fun things going in this year, which it's important. Like you mentioned, or I mentioned to you, this is our 6th year. So the passion of putting this thing together, that's gone. It's all matter of fact. It's all, this is what needs to happen in November, December, January, February, etc. Which may be a good thing, because passion kind of weans out after a couple of months, and then you're kind of just left with this reality of what needs to be done. And I think I'm kind of enjoying that this reality is just in the beginning, and I go through logically of what needs to be done, but I've also found putting a bit of that, my own personal passion of mythologies into it is awakened a nice little spark of excitement, because Sangha this year will be different than other years. It'll be newer.
How many what's the kind of the top, how many people can you have maximum?
We got 90 acres of land, and this is a common topic yearly when we have our staff meetings, and the consensus is we keep going as long as we can maintain the integrity.
So could you do like 300 people?
Oh, we get more than that every year.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, the last couple of years has been 400 plus.
Okay, good. So to get 500 or 600 then would be a big deal.
Yeah, and keeping the integrity right now has nothing to do with the numbers as much as it has to do with me learning how to manage front gate properly and foreseeing what needs to be added to this festival as numbers grow. So this year we got a projects manager who's experienced with that and knows about contingency plans and how things should be structured as this thing grows, like parking and other issues that tend to come up when you get larger numbers of people. So I'm not afraid with the numbers growing, and I think we can really handle it. And we got some great people on council that are very experienced at front gate and project management.
And latrines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's never really been a problem, thankfully. Like, you know, we've always been doing well with making sure they're clean, and toilet paper and soap and.
Oh, right. Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. You know, I'm looking forward to coming again this year.
Yeah, and we'll have to talk about, you know, because you were involved last year, and
I'd love to do something. You know, I don't want to put you on the spot in front of.
Well,
camera,
you can't, because it's too much. It's too much for me to look at all the applications. Yeah. So I still get people contact me sometimes twice a day, people about, hey, Ray, I want to do this at Sangha. And I'm like, can you put an application in? Because certain applications will go to certain coordinators. It's just too much. Already we're 20, 30 applications in, and we just opened up 10 days ago. So it's just too much for me to manage. So if you have applications, even if we're good buddies, put them in there, because our application process is such where you have to provide a picture, a description, bio, your technical needs. Because if we have this conversation now, I'm going to forget that before I even hit Marta Loop.
Well, I wasn't even thinking to have this conversation.
Okay.
You know,
but please do, and please do. It's already some amazing stuff coming in.
Is there? Nice. Well, I'm sure that we'll work something out. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward. I'm not a big festival guy generally, but you know what? I haven't been because I had a store, and it was hard to get away from the store. You know, it was interesting. Is that I was committed to this store that I had for 10 years, and so when I went away, it was to go to Indonesia to buy product for my store. So that was my time away. Generally, was a couple of times a year, and now I have this whole new freedom. Like I don't have to be anywhere, and it's quite interesting to also have let go of the identity of, you know, having a job or going to work somewhere every day. And so maybe I'll do more festivals this year.
Well, you know, there's an old story that is still practiced in some cultures around the world right now, carnival. And the premise of carnival is that when we're focused in on something and we're really determined to make it work like a business, most other possibilities begin to dissolve. They're not even there, even though they're there.
Yes.
They're no longer even picked up in our peripheral vision.
We don't see them.
So the whole aspect of carnival once a year was to jump into the dark world and look at all the other possibilities and look at who you are and what's holding you back. And then we get that awakening of all the different possibilities that are there for us again. So I don't know if you went to carnival or anything like that, but it's amazing. Like, I can see in you that, you know, the world's open. Like,
yes, yeah, it really is. Where's carnival?
They still practice this in Trinidad. I'm not really sure where the source is. It's been really hard for me to find the origins of carnival, but carnival is based on the philosophy that time and space are both measured equally. So we have 360 degrees in a circle, and the calendar year was marked out with 360 days. But we all know there's more days in a year than 360. It was those excessive days of about 4.5 days that were called carnival. And this is where you ceremoniously, like, so you didn't really do it. You slayed your leader, the king or whatever, and you would spend one night in your fears and one night in your desires and bring them to light. And
wow, that sounds pretty crazy.
One day Ray will create a carnival.
all rules are off. Right?
Well, I suppose. I mean, there must be some foundation, otherwise it would break up into chaos. Like, I mean, if you've been to the tantric events, there's boundaries, there's agreements that we make.
Yes.
Whenever and whatever level that we explore intimacy, and these are listened to, and you can still have profound shifts and changes.
Wow. Well, I'm interested.
And this is part of the reason why I withdrew quite a bit. So I don't know, maybe around this time last year, I was reading the story of Artemis. And it just gave me that huge aha moment where I felt like my heart and everything inside of me just shake. Like I just read something that's going to create a fundamental shift in my life.
Tell us about Artemis.
I can tell you a lot about Artemis, but this particular story, Artemis is bathing in the pond naked. And some shepherd is out hunting with his dogs for a deer. And as he's going through the bushes, he happens upon Artemis. And the first eyes he casts upon Artemis is lust. She's beautiful and he wants her. And Artemis recognizes this. And she, I don't know if she literally snapped her fingers, but turned him into a deer. And his own dogs ripped him apart.
Oh.
So, I mean, we're not going to look at the story literally, but we're going to actually look at what these stories really mean to people. And at the time, and for me now, and hopefully other people, it's a story to let you know that when you plan to meet something, when you invoke an energy in your life, when you go to look and delve into something, prepare yourself for it. So this has awakened this incredible research into desire. And what is desire for me? And earlier, before the camera went on, where you were talking about different identities that you've had. These are our desires. Desire on how we see ourselves, and they can reside greatly in the unconscious, and we don't really know. So, for example, some of the events I'm creating, like Theatrum and Familiaris, which I did earlier last year, the attendance is growing. The shows are being more polished. They're told better. And I found myself inflating my ego. And there was a desire for me to be looked at as somebody intelligent that was making worthy contributions in the community, which is fine. But when I got feedback on what needed to be done better in order for a theatrical show to be more professional, it affected me on the opposite end of the spectrum as much as I inflated myself. So there was an equal and opposite deflation that I had to move through.
Yes.
But all that did was make me more fascinated about what other desires do I have inside of myself.
Yes.
You know, we have sexual desires for sure, but there's so much desire to be recognized, to accumulate, to have praise in our life.
And we pay a price for desire.
If we put too much weight and value in that and it's not there, then there's that collapse. There's that tearing apart. There's not literally dogs ripping me apart, but it certainly feels like that at a heart level.
I was listening to Ram Dass the other day, and he talked about, is it in the Tao where they talk about desire, that heaven and earth, everything's in balance except if we have a desire. Desire takes us.
That's a common mythology around the world, but
Yes.
sometimes the man's the earth and the woman's the sky, and sometimes it's the other way around, where the woman, the earth, can't give birth because God's pressing into her too much. So she grows legs and pushes God away, and that's where you get the bull, like being that symbolic thing that separates heaven from earth. Really quite interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, in Hawkins, David Hawkins' work, he puts desire below the breaking point of creativity. So it's above anger, and somewhere between pride and anger is desire. And
anger could be a form of desire, a desire for revenge, a desire to hurt, a desire to lash out.
Yes, and so when I'm, in a way, in this very simple form for me, when I'm in desire, there's almost, there can be complaint in it. I'm wanting something to be different than it is in this moment. And so instead of me truly being here present and accepting this moment exactly as it is, there's a desire for it to change. And so the desire takes me out of my present moment. So I'm not in acceptance, I'm in, I'm not in unconditional love, I'm in desire. But our conditioning has been very strong that we need to have desire. You need to know what you want, and we've been told through our culture that you're not going to get anything if you don't know what you want, and to shift from wanting anything to actually just allowing life, to be, because the truth is it's an illusion if I think I can not just allow.
Well, I mean, this
I
has
just
been
cause trouble.
This has been understood for thousands of years, going back to the philosophers of Greek philosophy, that duality, right?
Yes.
So there's a duality in desire. They called it willful desire is the healthy desire, and that's the desire to transcend, to grow, to nourish. And then they got the flip side of that, which is often referred to as the libido, the destructive desire, the desire
To get.
to acquire, the wish for something different and better, and to be able to differentiate between the two of that,
Isn't that interesting? And I talked to you earlier. We chatted about the book in the 12-step book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and Bill said he talked about the first desire that you spoke of. He called that the proper use of the will towards awareness or consciousness or growth or connection with spirit or divinity, as the proper use of the will. And it's interesting that he has that in his book.
Well, my only argument about, maybe not the way he put it, my only argument with, the Greek philosophers, even Carl Jung for that matter, was that willful desire was desire that was defined as based on reason and logic. But reason and logic has too much of a relationship with our fears and desires.
Well, sure, it's a lower vibration.
And a lot of things in our humanity have been justified through reason and logic that were just tragic and horrific.
I'm not sure that Jung ever got past reason and desire into love, or into unconditional love, or into...
Maybe, I'm not sure,
in Hawkins speak, up to... he built this scale from 0 to 1,000, 1,000 being Christ consciousness, and between 500 and 600 was unconditional love, and below 500 was intellect.
And again, that's a philosophy, story, mythology that pops up throughout time and space, around the world, in Hinduism, in yoga science. I'm not really sure if Ashtanga, but in any case, it's looked at as the gunas. So you look at the gunas as the rajas, the fire, the tamas, the cold, the light, and the dark. Again, it's not black and white. There could be a whole scale of 100 different levels, where you could have a whole lot of dark, but a little bit of light, and that could be your progression as you move towards balance in your life.
How many gunas? 4?
Well, there's 3. So if you look at yin and yang, it's really the same as yin and yang. You got yin, you got yang, and then you got that sign where they're in balance. So so I lecture at the university on philosophies like this, and when you get tamas, which would be the yin, the soft, the compliant, the passive, that could be a state of somebody really stuck and not doing anything in their life. And then when they start to think about, maybe life would be better if I got off this couch and started going for a walk, if exercise was part of it, then that would be like a number 2. And then a number 3 would be actually doing it. And then the number 4 would actually be a deep commitment. But then you get people stuck in that we might refer to as the type A's, where now they got to run marathons all the time. And it's not really nourishing and good for the body either.
No, they're attached to that.
Yeah. So it's a great way to kind of get to know who you are and where you are in a particular part of your life.
Well, in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna speaks of the gunas, in Michael, who wrote the version that I'm reading of the Bhagavad Gita over and over and over again. I forget his name right now. Anyway, you've read, of course, and he speaks of the gunas, and Krishna speaks of it, and so, but I don't know a lot about the gunas, and it's interesting. I guess there's so much in the Gita that we could venture into to see the depths of it.
But really, the essence is like that is just a reflection and a different way of explaining the way you understand this 100 steps or whatever that.
the scale.
Yeah, it's just a different way of explaining it. And for some people, it'll land. And for some other people, the Gita will land.
Yeah.
And it's just got to stop separating my ways better and just understand that we're all telling the story, just told differently.
Stephen Mitchell. He wrote the version that I love. But Hawkins was able to use kinesiology, muscle testing, to measure vibration of everything, past, present, and future. It's an amazing science, really, that to measure the truth in things. And the Gita he measured at vibrated at over 900. So Christ consciousness at 1,000. And so when I listen to the Gita, it's not so much to the words as to the vibration. You know, when I feel like I'm in the presence of this amazing teacher that comes through the words, you know, between the words, and rather than to go deep into the meaning or the intellect of the teaching, but just to feel the vibration of the teaching. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's beautiful. And one of the things I love is that at this time in our development of mankind, we have access to so many amazing high vibration teachers. You know, they're available on the internet, the books that are available today, and just having that access, I think, lifts the vibration of the whole planet. You know, the work that you're doing yourself, you know, with Mythology, with Carl Jung, lifts your vibration, and as you lift, I believe we take, we lift so many others. You know, whether they're aware of it. It's like the water level goes up, and because of the work that you're doing, and we all go up.
Yeah, I don't think we should underestimate how powerful it is to live a truthful life, a loving life, and how much that affects other people.
Yeah, whether they see it or not, whether it's you know, doesn't matter. It's not about in the results as much, you know, from our perspective, because it's such a big ocean. We don't get maybe to consciously see how this is happening.
Well, when I first came in here, we were talking about the unknown and the fear of the unknown. And when somebody lives that truth, they're showing us it can be done. There's nothing to be afraid of. And I think that can be very inspirational for many of us.
Yeah.
Like there could be something better than what I'm doing.
So, like our little experiment. Yes. And there's a line in my 12-step book that says that we had a new employer. Being all-powerful, he provided all our needs. If we stayed close to him, performed his work well. And so that's kind of the line I'm living. I have a new employer. Every day I check in and say, okay, what we have me do, how, you know, just I'm available. And the work, the phone rings. It's just amazing, the work that I get to do. And with it makes me grin to tell you, you know, and then somehow the rent gets paid, and you know, it actually works. It works.
That's good to know.
Yeah, it does. You know, but my conditioning all my life is that I had to manage all that stuff. I had to take care of those things. I had to be, you know, I was conditioned really strongly towards financial success and for, you know.
Oh, me too. I remember, like, I was a teenager, and like I was led to believe about this formula. School, university, study this, major that, get this work experience, go do this, write that, get a family. Like, it didn't take long before I was like, I don't want any of that. Like, I just planned out my whole life. All I do is just live it now.
So, but you did go to university.
I dropped out in my second year, and then I went to college for a little bit. And this was my early 20s, and that's when I finally packed my bags and just left to go travel the world. And I found that provided a much better education for me.
Of course.
Yeah. If I wanted to learn about religions and comparative religions, I just went and knocked on the door of the mosque or the temple, and everybody, as long, providing they could speak English, would welcome me with open arms and make me tea. And what is it you want to know, son? You know?
Nice. Quite an adventure. You have some stories.
Yeah. I'm not done yet, though.
No. Really?
Yeah.
Fun. Well, I'm honored that you came today and
Me
to share
too.
with us.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
And yeah, really, I've just been I've been just really, really quite happy throughout the winter, even though I guess we're still in winter, just to be at home and read and write and really explore stories. I love stories and just read, and I do like to read things that challenge me, so I have a little understanding that for every 2 difficult books I read, I get to buy something that I could not have to read with a dictionary. And it's crazy, you know, some of the stuff I've read that, it's tough. I had to read one book twice. It was really good, probably one of the best books I ever read. But
what was it?
Goddesses, The Divine Feminine by Joseph Campbell. I'll probably read that a 3rd time.
Nice.
I had to buy a friend of mine that for Christmas as well. But and then I go to buy a book at the bookstore, and I read it in 2 days because I know the words. Still blows me away. Like, I've just found this passion for art open up in me.
What bookstore do you like?
Oh, I don't have a preference. Chapters happens to be close to me, but I find I'm starting to understand my real passions and what it is I really want to read. And I went to Chapters yesterday, and I probably had a dozen books to look for, and there were none there. You have to order them. So it's kind of a bummer to have to order on Amazon. But then again, you know, in 4 days it's in my mailbox, and I can start reading. But there's just something about being around the buzz of people walking up and down the aisles. You know,
you go to the secondhand
cafe.
bookstore? What's it called?
Are there any more left?
Yes. Yeah, there's one down by Community in Chinook. Just it was on 14th Street and 17th Avenue, and Fair's Fair.
I'll have to check it out. I've just noticed a lot of the bookstores that were here when I first moved to Calgary are now gone. But then again, Amazon, like, whew.
Oh, do we have to wrap it up? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if the mic is picking up my stomach gargling, but it is lunchtime. Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
I remember you were saying that you might have like a fundraiser coming up at Cali Dons, at Evolved.
Well, yeah. So.
You're not sure of it?
Well, the story is almost written. So the story, it would, because it's springtime, in keeping in with the theme of spring, it's going to have to do with desire. So I've written a story almost complete on the story of desire. So it's looking at the psychological understanding of desire. It's looking at the religious influence of desire. It's looking at the mythological, historical understanding of desires. So this would be a combination of storytelling and stage shows plus workshops. But that's also 2 months away out of Sangha. So right now I'm just sitting on the story thinking, will I have energy to put on 2 shows that close together? And as I had mentioned earlier, Theatrum is still a contender for the Calgary Fringe Festival. So 1 festival and 2 theater shows in a short period of time might be too much for me.
Okay, so you're not... All right. Well,
yeah, but I love it. I went to Lunchbox Theater a couple of weeks ago, and I got a glimpse of quite possibly what I'll be doing in my future sometime. I love writing stories. I love telling stories ever since I was a kid.
Nice.
And I went to go see a local man do one. Tomatoes almost killed my life, but banjo saved my life. For whole hours on the edge of my seat, just like, I think I'm going to be doing something like that one day.
Nice. Well, we look forward to, continuing our relationship and being part of whatever it is you do.
Awesome, thank you.
And thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
And you guys, Sangha, when do tickets go on sale?
Early bird tickets are on sale till the end of February.
Oh, so they're on sale now?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and it's great. We're selling tickets already, so that's wonderful, considering it's winter. Yeah.
So they look it up. Is it sangha.ca? Sangha?
CommunitySangha.com.
Okay.
Now, if you want to get involved, our applications are open for presenting, performing, art classes, and the Hokey Pokey Clinic, which is for children or the young at heart. And next month we'll open up applications for people who want to work trade, so who want to help us in the organization of the festival in exchange for a ticket.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for watching us today, and share this. If you love Sangha, share it. And, because the more people that get to see this, they get to connect with the festival and what's happening in Ray's life as well. And last time that you came in and spoke was about a year ago. We talked about a year ago. And you had so many people watched your...
I think it was the hair.
So many people. It was wild.
I'm sure my mom was half of those numbers.
You're popular and fun. So,
thank you.
Love you guys, and follow us on YouTube. We'd like that if you'd follow us on YouTube, and subscribe on YouTube and help us grow that little YouTube channel. We're going to put this on there as well. Cheers. Love you. Talk to you soon. Bye.